Show presented by Awesemo.com. I'm Alex Baker, joined today by Phil Bennetzen. Phil, how's it going, man?
Great, Alex. Ready to get into this talking about Miami Homestead.
Yeah, it's going to be nice getting a fresh start here because these past few races, it's like there's been some huge chalk and inevitably there's some busts along the way. So figured we could talk a little bit about the previous couple races, but let's set the table first. So Miami Homestead, this is a 400-mile race, mid-length track. So this is pretty similar to a lot of the races we've been seeing. But if you played Wednesday's race, that was at Martinsville, which is a really short track. So this is back to normal, I'd say.
Mhm.
So how's Miami Homestead kind of different from some of the other tracks we've been seeing?
Shape-wise, it's your typical cookie-cutter D-shaped oval, mile-and-a-half track, just like where we've been with Las Vegas, Charlotte, Atlanta. Uh, uh, what sets Miami apart is it's got high banking, so it's fairly similar to Chicagoland, but we don't get to race at Chicagoland this year. That race, I believe, became the second Charlotte race. So it's taking the cookie cutter mold, but adding the uniqueness of high banks to it, which makes it a fairly entertaining race. Now, the thing that's definitely making this race different this year is that for as long as I can remember, Homestead has been the final race of the year. That was where the champion was crowned. You know, the past few years, it's had even more impotence on it because of the way that NASCAR has formatted the playoffs, where you go from 12 to 9 to 6, and then the final four at Homestead, and whoever finishes the best out of those four ends up with the championship. Well, now we're removing that element from this race. This is just race one of 26 and determining who makes the playoffs and who doesn't. So it's making for a very unique way of looking at this race and the statistics from the past few years.
Yeah, so that makes a little bit of a difference because in the playoffs the format's a little different. Like guys get eliminated and then they're kind of replaced by like some newer faces usually. So is the competition a little bit stiffer at Miami Homestead this time compared to like what playoff field?
I'm going to believe so, because I think what you've seen the past few years is that everybody understands, just let the top four guys race themselves. Don't get in their way. Don't try to make a name for yourself by going out and winning this race. Um, the past couple of years before last year, Kyle Larson, quite frankly, could have won both races, but he did the noble thing. Whenever the leaders got near him, he just stepped aside and let them fight it out. There's always whoever won the championship inevitably was the winner of that race. So drivers have generally, kind of just step aside, let those four have the spotlight. You don't want to be in the headlines that following Monday because you were the idiot that was blocking, like we would expect a Ryan Newman to do. Didn't want to give up a spot and cause something to happen in the race affecting the championship. So it's definitely going to be a much different race.
That's awesome. Yeah, so it should be a good one. So the past few races we've been seeing like the pricing has been set after the or after the starting order is known. Now we've been having some different dynamics than usual because they haven't had qualifying except that one race, and we've seen that certain drivers have just been extremely cheap. And I know on Wednesday, one of our favorite value plays, Austin Dillon, he was the value play du jour, and I had 60%, and he like crashed right at the start of the race. So it's always a kind of crazy experience playing these NASCAR DFS contests because you gotta have all six guys do pretty well. Now this week, the guy that has a really big place differential upside is priced up, so that'll be an interesting dynamic. Also, So the last race at Martinsville, we had 500 laps. This time we have 250. So let's just briefly for some of the NASCAR newer players, how does the 250 versus 500 laps change your approach to these contests?
Okay, yeah, we are seeing for DraftKings purposes because we're factoring in fastest laps and laps led. We're seeing nearly a 250 lap reduction in the total number of laps. So I mean, we are drastically decreasing the amount of fastest laps and laps led point available on the board. Which, if you remember my 101 article, it's like a sliding scale. We had 500 laps on the board. You were looking at 3 to 4 dominators, depending on who you were looking at. Well, now that we're reducing those laps, our number of dominators goes down as well. So in the majority of your lineups, you're looking at 2 guys that are going to lead the bulk of this race. Now, because salaries are as quirky as they are on DraftKings, you can fit in a third guy real easily. But the prospects of 3 guys leading the bulk of this race, and each of them paying off for what we need fantasy point wise, it's on the slimmer side. So on DraftKings and FanDuel, I'm going to base the majority of my lineups around a dual dominator build.
Nice. Yeah, that's half as many dominator points. So we're not going to see those really enormous point totals. At Martinsville, like a lot of times they have guys score up to like 200 points. And we saw that come to fruition, not 200, but Logano got 128, Truex got 112. And you pretty much need those guys in your lineup to win. Now, with half as many laps, that's about where they would cap off. And we saw Kevin Harvick, he really dominated the race on Sunday last week, and he ended up with 111 points. So that kind of shows the difference. He led 151 laps in Sunday's race, and less points spread around between these top guys means there's just going to be more chance that one of the place differential guys is going to be key. Now, and let's talk a little bit about FanDuel versus DraftKings, because FanDuel, they changed up their format this year. There's no points for fastest laps anymore, just 0.1 for laps led. And I think that's changed the strategy a little bit because there really aren't very many dominator points to go around. So you're really banking on guys that will finish the race high in the order. And they also don't give as many points for place differential. So how is your approach different on FanDuel these days?
Anything below 300, generally, I like to looking in that 200 to 300 range. I think you're probably playing it safe by sticking with that 2 dominator build. That is, unless we have a bunch of guys in the 20s and 30s, big name guys, the guys that are priced above 10K that can get you 20 place differential spots. Because remember, like you said, we've only got 267 laps on the board, so there's only 26.7 laps led points available for these guys to get. And if they finish the race, that's 26.7 points there for each lap that they're on the lead lap. So I've played around with this all year, and I've done a single dominator build and then added these guys that are starting in the teens, starting in the 20s, trying to stay away from the punt plays. And generally, it works out that the optimal is those 2 guys that led the majority of the laps. So I don't see a reason to get away from that this week, because of the way that they keep setting the field. We do have some guys in the teens, and we'll get to them later, that do have, place differential upside plus a top 5 finish, but they're all kind of starting 10th, 11th, and 12th. So, unlike DraftKings, where if they were to move into the top 5, we're talking about 7, 8 place differential points. Here on FanDuel, we're getting 3, 4 maybe.
Yeah, so I think you make a good point that the dominators tend to end in the optimal because there's a high correlation between getting dominator points and finishing the race in a high position. So that's kind of why I'm willing to take chances on some guys on DraftKings that you may not be good values because when they do get those dominator points, like they're gonna have that high finishing position as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, in FanDuel, you can get a much stronger lineup. You don't have to go down to really the punt plays. So there's usually like one or two value plays each week that are pretty much like the ultimate chalk, so that you can make the like really sick lineup of all studs. We'll get into those guys later in the show. Now, guys, if we need you to click this thumbs up on the YouTube video, that helps us out a lot. And also mention we have an Xfinity race today and tomorrow, and a truck race today. And I have projections and ownership posted for those. So make sure to sign up for the membership if you want to get that information. Now, let's get into the drivers here, because we want to talk about the dominators, the guys that you really want to lead your lineup off with. As far as Vegas odds, there are three guys that are pretty closely ranked by the sports books. We have Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex. These guys are both about 5-1, and Kyle Busch is about 6-1. Now, I have to believe that Kyle Busch, having really lost people a ton of money this past month, is going to be the least popular of these three. But he is a lot cheaper than those two guys. Truex won the last race. Harvick won the race before. So, do you think that Harvick and Truex will be the chalk here?
Yeah, probably people will just think back to last week at Atlanta and remember what the optimal was there, where if you didn't have a combination of Harvick and Truex, then you weren't close to sniffing the top of the leaderboard. So I mean, it's just as easy as, well, if it worked last week, then let's just slam it in this week. In my article, I ranked the guys starting 1 through 8 in the order of how I like them as dominators, because it's just the way that the qualifying fell out. And I listed Truex 1, Harvick 2, and Busch 3, based off of what they've done at this track in the past, based off of what they've done in this package. I really believe that Gibbs has turned the corner. It's taken them a while to kind of get up to snuff with the rest of the teams like Hendricks and Joe Gibbs, not Joe Gibbs, Hendricks and Penske. And I think that perhaps Gibbs has turned the corner. You know, we had really good results from them at Atlanta last week, and hopefully that momentum carries forward for them. You're getting Kyle Busch at such a great number on DraftKings, 10,100. Of all of these guys who are starting in the let's just say the top 7, because Alex Bowman's price is a bit of an anomaly. Busch is the second cheapest. You know, Keselowski comes in the cheapest at 9,500, but then you've got Kyle Busch at 10,100, and you know, any other year, any other point in 2019 or 18, telling you that you could get Kyle Busch for this cheap relative to the price of everybody else, it's a price point that you would jump on. Now, I know I made this same argument for Martinsville on Wednesday night, and that ended up just not working out whatsoever. But I mean, that short track racing, Kyle put a gigantic hole in his front end, and his night was ruined after that. It was just hoping that he could accumulate spots via attrition. This is a different race. Kyle has ran well here in the past. Hopefully what he did at Atlanta carries forward into this week, and he can really get himself on the board.
I hope you're right, because I'm going to be having a lot of him. And the reason for me is pretty simple. I think Kyle Busch, he has a really long track record, and we know he's got the money. And that's like the number one factor in determining who has the chance to win these races. And he's as well funded as anybody, so I have no doubt that he's going to have a top of the line car this week. Now, there is a lot of variance in NASCAR, and Kevin Harvick, he hasn't had the car troubles, and he's been winning and racking up a ton of fantasy points. Martin Truex, he's been a lot more hit or miss, but I think that people are going to look at the last race and kind of see Harvick and Truex as the guys to go to. Kyle Busch, if you didn't know anything about NASCAR and you looked at like the results so far, you'd be like, this guy is a total like scrub, right? So I think Harvick will be the most popular because he has by far the highest fantasy points per race on the sites, and that's going to be a piece of information everyone's looking at when they're building their lineups. Now, the second highest guy that's starting off at the top of the pricing is Chase Elliott. If you look at a race by race average of speed, he's like right up there with Harvick. He's had a lot of great results. I mean, we all remember that race where he got spun out by Kyle Busch at the last minute. So that kind of hurt his fantasy points when you look at an average. But Chase Elliott, maybe he goes under the radar because he's not quite as big a name as Harvick and Truex. So do you think maybe we can get some leverage going to Chase here?
Yeah, I mean, people that are just going to look at Miami numbers, they're going to not land on Chase with finishes of 15th, 7th, and 5th. So I mean, you throw out what happened last year. He's been so-so. At that $11,000 price tag too, that's a jump up from what we've been paying for Chase, and to not have Chase on the pole, it really kind of it hurts in the player's eyes, his his prospects of leading this year. When you look at what he's done in the 550 horsepower package so far this year, he's got the win at the second Charlotte race, a night race. The first Charlotte race, the Coke 600, a second place finish. And you look at those Darlington finishes, 4th and 38th, 8th, so at Atlanta. So, I mean, we know Chase is fully well capable of leading laps, getting himself up to the front. It's just, how much do you want of Chase compared to the field? Because Chase is in this area with Joey Logano, where I don't know how much I really want of Joey, but God, I don't want to go under owned on him because he's fully well capable of winning this race.
That's the crazy thing is like there's so many arguments for each of these guys that it's going to be really hard to choose between them. And Chase Elliott, he has a high price tag and he has a bad starting position at 5 compared to some other guys. So I feel like maybe he's the guy that gets left out when people finalize their lineups. Now we got to talk about the pole sitter, Denny Hamlin. He's been he hasn't really like done a ton for fantasy. He did win the Toyota 500, but he only had 12 laps in that race, and he didn't finish well on Wednesday. He finished 24th, so been pretty hit or miss. Certainly not winning people a lot of money, but he's got that prime position to lead the early laps, and to me that's worth a decent amount. So how do you feel about Hamlin's prospects?
Hamlin makes me want to throw my hands up, because when I was doing the initial research on Thursday, compiling the race sheets, it makes no sense how a man, this is now his 4th straight pole at Miami, how he won the pole in 17 and 18, and then I believe last year they awarded the pole to him based off of standings, because I believe that they had rain, and go figure, rain in southern Florida. And if you haven't looked at the forecast, you probably don't want to look at it, because it is chances of rain every day for the next 3 months. Denny, he's averaging 14.3 laps led per race, 14.3 fastest laps, only 35 DraftKings points per race. His finishes in these last 3 races, 10th, 12th, and 9th. I mean, he's been given the premier spot to lead this race, to become a dominator, and he's done nothing with it. Now, if I go back beyond these last 3 years and see what the pole sitter has done, in 2016, led 79 laps, 24 fastest laps, finished 3rd. Fairly good. 15, led 0 laps, finished 10th. Not what you're looking for. But the years before that, in 2014, led 161 laps, 79 fastest laps, finished second. And then 2013, 144 laps led, 39 fastest laps, finished second. Maybe it's a Denny problem at Miami. Maybe Denny just he puts himself in bad spots at the beginning of this race, and he just is never able to recover from it. So, you know, I warned, don't let what's happened at Miami in the past few years, you know, weigh too heavily in your decisions towards what what you expect for a race in June versus November. But God, I think I've seen enough from Denny to just say I'm probably not going to have any of him as a potential dominator in my lineups. Now that could easily come back to bite me, and if he leads that first segment, then I'm probably going to go turn off the TV and go yell at Noah and say, hey, let's go outside and play soccer for the next 2 hours. But I right now I think he's a strong candidate to push aside and say nah. And quite frankly, it's been really weird. The pole sitters the last few races, they have been guys that you would have wanted in your lineups, but it's been better off fading them.
Man, it's interesting because, I mean, being the pole sitter is a big advantage for those laps at the start of the race. And he's not cheap. The front of the race is also stacked. I mean, you got Logano starting second, Keselowski third, and then Kyle Busch fourth, Chase, Truex, Harvick. So he's gonna have
that's a good point there. You've got so many of these top tier guys right behind each other, and depending on where Denny starts, he's either going to have he's probably going to take the line that's going to give him his teammate behind him, but you know he may take the preferred line, go up high, or go down low if he prefers that groove, and end up having Brad behind him, and then it could be chaos to start the race. I believe that is what happened last year in this race, where Denny and Joey were starting. I believe Denny and Joey were starting next to one another, and for some reason something happened. Joey went 3 wide, and Denny, it didn't go good for
him. Yeah, so not a guy you can really count on, and the competition is stiff at that front of the race. So, man, I think he's a good play, but not someone that you need, certainly. Now, Logano starting second, I have him as one of the tougher guys to get to, because he doesn't have that number one spot. He's his odds aren't quite as good. He's 10-1, where there's 4 guys with better odds than him, and he's just as expensive as anyone else. So he's kind of towards the bottom of my dominator list. But that being said, if he's gonna be unpopular, I haven't done the ownership projections yet, but we'll have that tomorrow. I think he's got as good a chance as, not quite as good a chance as anyone, but like his chances are pretty significant. Now, one of the features I have is I have this top drivers tool that I introduced last month, and it gives you the odds that each guy will be one of the top 2 dominators of the race. Now, Logano or Hamlin, I have at 27%. Logano, I have at 20%. And then Harvick, Truex, and Kyle Busch are all at 23%. So Logano, this is a guy where it's like, if you're just like going off projection, you might miss that upside he has, where he has that prime position, where if he does lead the start of the race, then he could put up a monster score. So how are you handling Logano?
Yeah, naturally, if Denny is a bad dominator candidate here at Miami, then that should naturally boost Logano's chances. And different track, different scenario. But Logano showed last week at Martinsville. His crew get him out front, or if he can just simply outmaneuver guys to get out front, he can sit on a lead. Logano won this race 2 years ago. Of course, he had the motivation of a championship behind him. His other finishes last 3 years: 5th last year, 6th 3 years prior. Logano has been fairly good here. You look at what he's done this year. He's got one win in this package. That was at Las Vegas. Las Vegas was a crap show to be honest. That's you know, if it wasn't for the rain that we're expecting and the cloudy skies, we might be talking about somewhat similar weather conditions. But yeah, Logano's another one. I was talking about Logano. He's in that category where I don't think I'm going to go heavier than the field, but I probably want to match the field in ownership wise in case he does hit.
Yeah, so I think that he's going to be a guy to look out for. Or maybe you have to get him into some lineups if you're not getting him. Now we do have a couple of budget dominators on the slate as well, and I'll be remiss if I don't mention Eric Jones. He's in the 6Ks and he's starting 15th, so he's got a little place differential upside. He's done horrible for everyone's fantasy teams these past few, but if you just look at the average speed over the past month, he's been up there with guys like Martin Truex and Kyle Busch as far as average speed, and he's half the price. So is this a guy you're going to be getting in your lineups?
Eric, he's stuck in salary purgatory right now with the other Eric Almirola, where they're regardless of where they're at, their numbers just aren't going to change. And DraftKings, I know you're watching right now because you continue to move the price of Daniel Suarez up and up and up. And next week he's probably going to be in the 9Ks. If you are watching, please wait until we have the running order before you set salaries, because if you just keep guys static to where they're at, we're going to have so much chalk and so much overlap for next week's race at Talladega. It's going to be mind-boggling. But yeah, you get Eric Jones 15th, lower price. This is essentially the same scenario that we had at Atlanta, but with better place differential and cheaper. You get a guy who's run well at a track last year at this track. Eric finished third, had a really good race. This is a track that Joe Gibbs has historically run pretty well at. And at 6,500, I mean, maybe the chalkier play will be going up to Ryan Newman, who's run here pretty well. Maybe people are going to go back to Austin Dillon, even though he butchered lineups on Wednesday night. Maybe they go with the higher place differential option and Ty Dillon. But I mean, out of all those guys, give me Eric Jones every time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're comparing Eric Jones and some of those guys, it's like there's not even a comparison. His odds to win too are really strong, 50-1. That's higher than anyone under under 8K. So, I mean, I think that he's going to be really hard to leave off just because he fits in every single lineup really easily at 6,500. Yeah, and if you're comparing him to like Ty Dillon at 6,700, like that's not even close.
Yeah, and if people do have fears about Eric Jones and what happened at Atlanta, throw it out the window. His throttle got stuck. Literally, his throttle got stuck, and then he had a tire issue on the restart, and his day was over after that. And to be honest, Eric became way too chalky for, I would have never imagined his ownership would become as high as it did. But I mean, everybody that lives within this echo chamber of NASCAR DFS heard that he was a good play, and the optimizers loved him because of his projections versus his salary. So, it was a victim of circumstance a couple, last Sunday, but clean slate. We're starting over again. Like,
yeah, sometimes you make the good play and it doesn't work out. That's DFS. So I'm going back to the wall here. We do have a sponsor for this show. There's a new car in the race for the NASCAR DFS. It's SuperDraft. And SuperDraft is really interesting because they have a multiplier system instead of salaries. So instead of having to fit within a salary cap, you get a multiplier of the fantasy points. Now, they have an interesting format where they give you points for laps led and laps completed. And it's a little bit more similar to FanDuel, where there's not a ton of dominator points. And I think if you use my projections on the website, you'll have a great chance at these tournaments. I see a huge edge in certain players. Now, I think this guy is going to be pretty chalky on. Well, I'm not sure about on. All right, so I'm talking about Christopher Bell. He's starting 36, but he's 9.3K on DraftKings. SuperDraft, he's a 1.7 multiplier. So that's like an absolute lock because you get point differential places, or place differential points. And on FanDuel, he's 6,600. So I think on FanDuel and SuperDraft, Christopher Bell is a lock. Now on DraftKings at 9.3K, that's like crazy because this is a guy that might finish in the middle of the pack on average. So, well, what are your thoughts on whether to pick Christopher Bell this week or not?
Yeah, everything besides DraftKings, he feels like a lock play. He's a lock in cash on FanDuel. You know, lock whatever you're doing on SuperDraft. But God, you can't pay $9,300 for Christopher Bell. For one, he really wasn't that good at Miami when he was racing in the Xfinity Series. You want to crown somebody in their transition from Xfinity to the Cup Series. First, it starts off with Tyler Reddick, who won both of the past two Xfinity races at Homestead, and then it goes to Cole Custer. And Cole Custer is $3,300 cheaper on DraftKings. Now he's only $200 cheaper on FanDuel, and he's got the same multiplier, that 1.7 as Bell on SuperDraft. So if it's a either or decision, I think you might go with Bell because it feels like Bell has a little bit of a higher ceiling, but Custer's definitely your consistency. And it's funny, for the season in this package, Custer actually has the better average finish. His average finish sits at 20th, while Bell's sits at 22.1. And I don't know exactly what to make of this, but when you look at their average running position, it flips. So it's somehow Custer towards the end is finding a way to advance himself a little bit further, while Bell is finding a way to move his way back. And it would be interesting to see if these two are actually the ones inverting their positions relative to one another. But yeah, there's no reason not to play both of them either on FanDuel and SuperDraft. But when it comes to DraftKings, you cannot pay $9,300 for a driver that is going to probably finish 23rd, 24th.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with you there. Now, Cole Custer, like, he's on the opposite end where he's an exceptional value, and he's clearly the better play on DraftKings. Well, the thing is, like, I can imagine a lineup where Bell would be really valuable because the Dominator points are fixed, so they're allocated among a certain number of guys. So having a guy that can really produce those placement points is valuable. Now, if you pair Bell with a Dominator lineup of like Alex Bowman, Blaney, and Eric Jones, then I could see it, but not a guy that's going to just be plug and play this week, as opposed to Custer, where you can play with Custer in pretty much any lineup and be really comfortable. Custer has not been quite as strong as far as speed, but he's good enough that he's going to pass McDowell, McLeod, Hoof. I mean, like, no question. Right. So he's kind of the go-to guy. Now, they did price. Okay, so Daniel Suarez, he's just been way too highly priced. It's way out of proportion with the quality of his new equipment. So I'm just crossing him off. How about you?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have Ty Dillon starting in 32nd. That's really good, but he does have worse odds than the 4 drivers below him as far as sportsbook, and his average speed has been significantly lower than like pretty much everyone ahead and behind him in salary. So he's another guy that I'm not really enthusiastic about. So are you going to have any Ty? Like, is there something I'm missing here?
No, yeah. 6,700 is a bit aggressive for Ty Dillon. That looks like one of those where DraftKings decided, hey, let's raise his price relative to his starting position, and they failed to do that with Priest and Custer, and Suarez is that's its own thing right now. I refuse to I refuse to act like Daniel Suarez is even in the player pool. I just immediately cross him out when I start going through all of my lineups. But on FanDuel, it's one story because Dillon is 4,500, and if you can't get up to Ryan Priest or Michael McDowell at 5,000, you definitely can't get up to the likes of Custer and Bell. Then Dillon's all right. I mean, this is a guy that for the season is starting. Let me look over here. In this package, he's starting around 21st place and finishing around 22nd. And now he's starting 32nd. So, I mean, you feel like he's going to pick up 9, 10 place differential spots. This shouldn't be a chaotic race, so there shouldn't be a reason why he wrecks out or goes, several laps down in the first stage. But on DraftKings, I don't think that you should pay 6,700 for him when you can just go down to Cole Custer at 6,000, or go all the way down to Ryan Priest at 57, or if you really need some salary savings, go down to Michael McDowell. And quite frankly, McDowell probably has a higher floor than Ty Dillon at this point, as well as McDowell's been racing. But this is the beauty of races like this when you only need 2 dominators. You don't have to go all the way down to Michael McDowell or Ryan Priest. You don't have to dip below Cole Custer whatsoever because there's so much value.
Yeah, man, this 6K range is stacked. So it's easy enough to leave Ty Dillon off, and Ryan Newman is starting a little bit too far ahead of starting with 14th, and that's a little bit too high for his price, I think. Now, there are some exceptional guys in the same price range. Tyler Reddick at 7,300, starting 24th. You mentioned his success in Xfinity here. He seems like a decent play. We have Eric Almirola. In my opinion, he's way underpriced at 6,300.
Yeah,
he's been a guy. He's been really contrarian because he's been starting like second, really high, and the guy they expect to move backwards at that position. But now at 21st, like there's some place differential upside. So is this the week that we're getting back on Almirola as chalk?
Yeah, he finally fell out of the top 12 in points, and now he's not starting second for the 4th week in a row. And if you look at Eric's numbers since they've gone to this random draw, it started off fairly well. Like, let me look here. Yeah, 12th and 7th in the 2 Darlington races, but then it started to go down. 15th and 20th in the two Charlotte races, and then you've got some other really middling results here, like 29th at Bristol, 17th at Atlanta, 33 at Martinsville. And I think he's put himself in bad situations because he started so far forward that his team has had to do some kind of quirky things to keep him up at the front, keep him competitive. I've seen him pitting off sequence. It's been really weird. But now he's starting in the 20s. He's definitely underpriced because, I mean, this is typically a guy last year that we would have been paying low 8K, high 7s for, and his price didn't get adjusted for where he's been. If you don't want to play Cole Custer for whatever reason, then Eric Almirola makes definitely a comparable pick. Almirola's speed has been up there with these guys. He's definitely showing that Stuart Haas power that the rest of his teammates are enjoying this year. So, I do wonder ownership wise if people are going to look at Almirola at 6,300 and just associate him with the rest of these lower tier guys. When it's like Eric Jones, you are getting a $2,000 discount on where he should be.
Yeah, and the thing I love about Eric Almirola this week is if you look at his price and his fantasy points per race that's displayed on the sites, you're not gonna pick him because he's been averaging 24 points at 6,300, and whenever you have a great play that looks like a bad play on the surface, then that's like ideal for getting an advantage in these contests. So I actually think now that I'm looking at it, just starting off my lineup with Eric Jones and Almirola, if I was doing single entry, like that is just completely like it's hard to argue with that start because like you can fit anyone in your lineup. They both have decent starting positions where they're not going to burn you with the place differential. And I mean, they're so cheap. Like that'd probably be my start. But then we got to find some placement differential guys too, because we've kind of crossed off. Well, I guess we have Custer, crossed off Bell. He's too expensive, and Suarez. So besides Custer, who are we looking at to maybe pick up some spots here?
The guy that's got to be at the top of everybody's list, and if he's not 100% owned in cash tomorrow on DraftKings, it's going to be a shame. It's got to be Tyler Reddick. He's got the pedigree based off of his Xfinity Series experience here, back-to-back wins at Homestead. He loves to ride the top rail, just like Larson and Stenhouse. But Reddick actually may be better at it at this point than Stenhouse is. Starting 24th, you get plenty of place differential. He got a bump down in salary for whatever reason. He's another guy. It's just so easy to get him in a lineup this week. And then you just move up the starting grid relative to Reddick. You've got Matty D starting 23rd. We've had our hard times with Matty D, especially at Bristol a couple of Sundays ago. But this is and Atlanta, for what it's worth, 25th there. But you're banking on Matty D not having the weird issues that he's had. William Byron starting 22nd. Byron has been good here before too. The last time that he raced at Miami in the Xfinity Series, I believe that was 2017. He didn't win the race. Custer won that race, but I believe he finished second or third and won the championship. People may not want to play Byron because his numbers at Miami in the Cup Series, they are dreadful. 39th and 24th are his finishes, but we're not worried about those two. Byron has become a better racer, especially this year. And we already mentioned Eric Almirola, 6,300. If you wanted to, if you've just got so much salary that you just need to spend up, I can see playing Matt Kenseth. Kenseth has been, before he retired, he had been pretty good here at Miami, finishes of 6th and 8th in his last two races here. Definitely not expecting a top 10 finish from Kenseth, but he could get into the 12th, 13th range. Do you want to pay 8,200 for that on DraftKings? Probably not, but he's got a good multiplier, 1.75.
Yeah, 1.75. That's crazy for Kenseth because, of course, he took over Kyle Larson's equipment, which is pretty solid.
Yeah.
And the SuperDraft is pretty cool because they have a deal going right now where if you use the promo code Awesemo, you get $10 free if you deposit $10 or more, or you can get $20 on 100 or more. And there are contests today for NASCAR, 15K prize pool, $12 to enter, 3K to first. Here's the thing is if you're playing these big contests on DraftKings and FanDuel, more often than not, you're gonna get your money completely wiped out. Your odds of winning are much better on SuperDraft. So if you're someone who's looking to grind your way up, playing on some GPP tournaments that are a little bit smaller and softer, that can help you kind of work your way up without crazy variance. And the drivers you're gonna pick at SuperDraft are so much different. Like, make sure to check out my projections. That'll be a huge advantage. But guys like Harvick, Truex, Elliott, without any like meaningful multiplier, like you're gonna get killed if you pick those guys over Kenseth and Byron and Custer. And I think that might be a rookie mistake that a lot of people make. So I'm pretty excited to play there this weekend. All right, let's talk about the rest of the guys that we missed. Well, let's talk about McDowell first. McDowell, he's been that value play for the past couple weeks. I was off him on Wednesday. That burned me big because I went to Austin Dillon instead. We all remember how Austin Dillon did. And then William Byron as well. He's a guy that William Byron is someone I want to talk about too, because he's like the opposite of McDowell, where he's been burning everybody. But McDowell, 5,200, starting 30th. We were gushing over him last Saturday. He did pretty good, but not great. But starting 30th, that kind of eliminates those freebie points you get because he is a guy that'll finish between 20 and 30 usually. So are you off McDowell this week?
Yeah, but the lineups that I've messed around with, I haven't needed to get to them. So I'm not going to force the issue to get down to $5,200 Michael McDowell just to say that, hey, I got the best punt play that everybody else is going to play. It is interesting to note that McDowell's multiplier at 1.65, that's lower than either Custer or Bell. So yeah. McDowell is getting the appropriate changes on SuperDraft, but it's definitely not happening here on DraftKings relative to their salaries. I think really the only reason that you would go down to the likes of McDowell and the rest of this flotsam hanging out in the lower 5Ks and the 4K range is that if you are going to go with either a triple dominator build, or you're going to go with Truex and Harvick, and then go with like a semi-hog / semi-dominator, a guy that's in that upper 8K, 9K range that you don't project to lead a bunch of laps, but is probably going to get accrue some maybe 20 to 30 fastest laps in the process of them moving up into the top 5. At that point, you're probably needing McDowell, but God, you're still better off sticking to these guys in the 6K range. Probably one of the things that hurts McDowell relative to last week is that McDowell starts 30th. So you've cut him off at the knees at the place differential versus where he has been. Now you're still getting him at the same relative salary on DraftKings, but you're losing that place differential that made him such a value last week when you needed all of the value that you could to fit in those multiple dominators.
Yeah, I agree completely. I have him projected to finish 26 on average, so I think that that's not going to really move the needle a ton for place differential. But I do agree, he's like way better than the other guys below him. So like when you're comparing him to BJ McLeod, who he's got really makeshift equipment every week, and then Quinn Hoof, all those guys, not really guys I'm going to be looking at. However, like sometimes you need a guy that makes everyone fit. Like if you do want Harvick and Truex, and I think that people who use an optimizer to build their lineups, they're going to end up with a ton of guys in the mid range: Kyle Busch, Blaney, Eric Jones, Almirola, Custer. Those are going to be the most popular guys for that crowd. I think McDowell will be popular among like casual players. So it's like I'm not sure exactly how ownership will shake out, because it's like if you're hand building and you don't know much about NASCAR, like he's going to be that guy you click when everyone else is. All the pros are going to Almirola, Eric Jones, etc. So I do like to make some lineups sometimes where I'm trying to target a group of people that have a little bit different builds. Try to differentiate my lineups based on line construction. So McDowell fits that criteria, but I don't feel very enthusiastic about it. All right, let's talk about some guys that we missed here. Jimmy Johnson starting 9th. He's not the most expensive guy on DraftKings anymore, but pretty much the not low as far as lineup spots because there's no upside for placement differential and not easy access to leading laps. So I have to imagine I'm not going to end up with much Jimmy, but how about you?
Yeah, Jimmy's just in such a tough spot where he's got all of the potential dominators starting in front of him. Now, could he meander his way through there and make his way to the front? Well, yeah. I mean, this is a much better version of Jimmy Johnson than we've seen in the past few years. In fact, if you look at Jimmy's numbers at Miami, you see a guy. It looks like he knows he's not competing for the championship, and he's, him and the wife and the kids. They've got a trip to Cozumel, flying out that next day. So let's just get this race over. So does Jimmy race it a little bit differently? Perhaps, but he's got a tall task with everybody in front of him, and he'll have to be fighting every one of them to get to the front.
Yeah, that's really tough, but yeah, it's hard to feel great about him. He does have about a 1 in 30 chance of winning, so when he does win, he will be mandatory. It's not very good odds to do so. Clint Boyer, kind of the same boat. He's been doing pretty well, and his price reflects that. He's 9K. Now, pivoting to Blaney, who's $200 cheaper, seems like the obvious thing to do because Clint Boyer, he's 50 to 1 to win. Blaney is 12 to 1. So they have basically the same starting position. So if you put any faith into sports books to have the real odds, you're gonna click Blaney for sure. Is there any reason why you'd want to go to Boyer?
I guess it comes with the amount of risk that you want, and this was actually something that came up in the article as I was digging through numbers this morning. Is that oddly at this track, Boyer he's been fairly good. His last 3 finishes are 6th, 8th, and 12th. We know Boyer likes to party. Maybe Boyer's just so excited for his upcoming vacation that it's coursing through his veins, and he's really excited, and it comes through the race. At this point, we're just digging for narrative to help explain why Clint does well one week, and then he runs the tires off of his car and finishes 25th after leading 80 plus laps. In this package so far this year, Clint 21.4 is his average finish. So I mean, it's not that good, but he's got some doozies in there, like a 39th at the Coke 600, 20th last week at Atlanta. I guess if you were wanting to take a safer stance and bet on what a driver has done at this track before, then you go with Boyer, who has been much better here than Blaney, but that Blaney's got the higher floor. Blaney's got the higher ceiling. He will most assuredly grab some fastest laps in his way to the front. He can fight for the lead. 8,800, that's a good salary for him. It's funny that Blaney actually has a lower multiplier than Kyle Busch. Blaney's 1.2 while Kyle Busch is 1.3. So that tells you where SuperDraft values these guys. I probably because of the value in the 6K, you're gonna find yourself needing to spend some money in the 8K range, and for me it's going to be a toss up between Kurt Busch and Ryan Blaney in the majority of the lineups that I build.
Nice, yeah. Kurt Busch. Wait, did you say Kurt Busch?
Yeah, Kurt, because he's 8,600.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So Clint Boyer kind of a little bit overpriced compared to some guys who are better than him for sure. Now we got in this next range we have DiBenedetto, Byron, Kenseth, and Bowman. And to me, Bowman and Byron kind of stand out as being a little bit underpriced. Now, Byron in particular has really done poorly in the recent memory. but I'm hoping that he can turn it around here and it's worth the gamble at 7,800. But who stands out to you in that group?
Yeah, yeah. You just mentioned Bowman. Bowman is a guy that fits two classifications for me. He could, he could be a potential dominator, but at that salary at 8,400, you know, if he can just grab me some fastest laps, if he can, maybe lead a couple of laps, however that comes around, he could make that salary. I think we've seen Bowman's better races have been in these afternoon into evening or just straight up night races, and this isn't gonna fit that bill. But perhaps Bowman does enough at 8,400 on DraftKings to be a value. Now at 11,000 on FanDuel, that's a hard no for me. I don't think that he'll come anywhere close to hitting that. Yeah, Byron is what he is, and you're just kind of betting on him to eventually, beat his streak of bad luck. Um, if it's a toss up between Byron and Matty D, I think you're going with Matty D. Hope on the expectation that Matty D hasn't been as bad as Byron has been these past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that I lean towards Byron a little bit, but both are pretty decent plays. Now it's all going to come down to ownership because these aren't guys you're playing because you're trying to build the best possible lineup. So that's going to be how I approach it. Now, Bubba Wallace at 7,600, he's a guy that I think he had a great race at Martinsville, but his funding just isn't good enough to really compete with some of the other guys in this range. So starting in 17th, I think he's probably going to move backwards. Is there any reason why you pick him this week?
No, I mean just everybody else. The 7K range is really kind of a weird range this week because you've got Bubba, you've got Ricky, you've got Reddick who's going to be the chalk, and then you've got Byron. So I really don't know how much people are really going to spend time picking players in this range. You know, Bubba has been running fairly well the last week, but his better finishes have been at short tracks. 11th at Martinsville, 10th at Bristol, but then you go to Atlanta. It was a 21st place finish. Now Bubba was running up near the top 10, but as the race progressed, he fell back and finished where we'd expect him to be. I'm expecting another 18th, 24th place finish for Bubba. And at 7,600, I don't want to pay that price for a guy who I'm expecting to lose place differential.
Definitely, yeah, he's way too expensive. But actually, now that I'm looking at some of the pricing on FanDuel, it's like the plays are going to be a little bit different. So let's touch on that for a second. Bubba Wallace is only 5K on FanDuel, so he's one of the better values in that range. But Christopher Bell at 6,600, starting in 36, they're like pretty similar as far as like where you expect him to end up. But he's got that extra bonus for starting farther back. So he's kind of like the guy that probably on FanDuel would have like a zillion percent of in Bell. But Bubba certainly fits in the line as well. And if the only difference is like what dominator you can get, like Bubba will certainly help you get those lineups completed. So how do you feel about him on FanDuel?
Yeah, really, because I mean, if you can get up to Bell Custer, you're going to do it 10 times out of 10. But if you're stuck at that 5K range, your debate is who has the higher ceiling and floor of Bubba versus Michael McDowell. And I think at this point you're going to say Bubba. Like probably McDowell might be a little bit safer, but I mean, where you talked about where you're projecting him to finish, I think that it comes down to the question of does McDowell gain more spots or does Bubba lose more spots, and where do they end up in the process? Because it's perfectly plausible for Bubba to lose more spots than McDowell gains, but still outscore him because of where he finishes on the grid.
Nice. Yeah, that's definitely true because that bonus point really does make it the trump card here. So, and on Super Draft, let's talk about some of the guys who stand out there. Ryan Preece is 1.8x. Now you get this multiplier in like not only are you getting this multiplier like the placement differential and finishing position, but also the number of laps completed. So the floor of these guys that start with a higher multiplier is way higher. So he's standing out to me as a top play on Super Draft, where on FanDuel and DraftKings, I'm not like super interested. So like, what's your take on who the Super Draft kind of guys are that stand out compared to the other sites?
Yeah, it's Custer, it's Bell, 1.7. You get that place differential. Maybe Ty Dillon because it's just a little bit more at 1.75. We talked about Kenseth. I mean, he's sitting there at 1.75. Probably the best guy compared to my expectations is going to be Tyler Reddick because he's only 1.55 at where he's starting. Because I mean, you get Byron at 1.5 versus Reddick at 1.55. I know who I want out of those two.
Nice. All right, so let's we've talked about most of the guys. Let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. So Miami Homestead, uh, what are you expecting for this race here?
Initially, the lead is going to flip flop. Like there is going to be some exchanges in the lead, and don't be surprised if by lap 10, 5 or 6 guys haven't exchanged the lead. You know, I think it'll set up where they can go 3 wide into the corner, fight each other for the lead, and then eventually somebody is going to surpass one another. I'm betting that it's going to be either Joey or Kyle from the onset, but eventually, and this seems to be the way it always is, eventually you get onto the race, and then it's going to be a Truex and a Harvick race. And the thing that I think that is going to settle it for me is that based off of last week, Truex has the #1 pit stall, and that should play a major factor in Truex getting off of pit road, having that lead, and being able to maintain it throughout the race.
Nice. Yeah, so this will be really interesting. There's so much competition for who's going to lead the start of the race because all the big names are starting up front. I'm trying to zig when everyone else zags, so I'm kind of leaning towards Kyle Busch as kind of my big spend. But I think like the optimal lineup is going to have a lot of mid-range guys because you can get dominators for cheap prices like Eric Jones, Ryan Blaney, and then should be a really interesting race to see how this shakes out. I think Harvick and Truex, exceptional drivers, the best odds to win. I'm just thinking they're not that much better than everyone else. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Phil, of course, writes an article that you can check out free every week on Awesemo.com. So make sure to do that if you haven't done so already. And if you guys could click the like button on the way out, appreciate that. And thanks everyone for watching. And good luck tomorrow in the race.